Right. Thanks. Jakub Klensky from MPA. I have a question to Dandan.
Yeah.
Thanks for a really nice talk and lots of things to learn. I was curious about many things, but let me ask about the low accretion efficiencies.
Yes.
So I understand this sample has a preference for systems in which the companion is low mass.
Yes.
So you're you have a bias that way, but is it possible to work out what's the maximum accretion efficiency you would be able to see in this population and still detect a system? Is there a number that we can more or less have there?
Can you repeat the question? I think I'm lost in the last sentence.
Let's say the accretion efficiency was 50%. Maybe that's too much because the companion would be too bright already. Or maybe it's 20%, or is it 10%? Is there a rough number that we can speculate about?
In terms of what? Right now, yes, we have the rough number.
Okay.
We have the mass accretion efficiency, if we call it, and then it's 70%.
Okay.
That's what we have right now, according to the mass, only for the mass.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, and then for the mass loss, yes. Because we get this number is according to, we assume the unseen companion is smaller as 0.08, the lowest mass of the star. And then given that assumption, we get this. It can be even higher. So it's 70% is a lower limit.
Mass loss, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Got it, thanks.
Oh, here you go.
Can you pass it to Neve? I had a question for Shayan. So you showed that if black holes receive natal kicks, then it can be slightly problematic for forming LMXPs through triples. So based on the galactic sample, do BH LMXBs have high systemic velocities that might point towards them having received large kicks? And does it depend on the mass of the black hole?
All right, to the last thing, I don't know if it depends on the mass of the black hole. To the first thing, getting strong natal kicks only kills the specific triple channel with no common envelope. If you believe in common envelope, triples give you 2x the mass transfer rate and therefore a 4x higher rate of low mass X-ray binaries than isolated binaries. 2 because 2 higher mass transfer rate. 2 because 2 times more triples than isolated binaries at those masses. The second thing, which you said, is what are the systemic velocities of low mass X-ray binaries? Nagarajan and Al-Badri 2025 did a fantastic job where they compared the systemic velocities of low mass X-ray binaries to their local stellar environment to say some weak, but some constraints on the natal kick that it could have received, and I would refer you to that paper. The summary is some are consistent with receiving no kick, some are consistent with receiving some kick at tens of kilometers second level. V404 sig is right at the middle of the Gaussian of the systemic velocity of its local environment, consistent with zero natal kick.
Thanks.
If there is no other topic, a comment on this discussion. First of all, for black hole kicks, there has been a lot of work of studying individual black hole X-ray binaries, taking them backwards in their evolution, and constraining black hole kicks for individual sources. For most of these systems, 0 kilometers per second is included. So usually you find upper limits. There's a couple of systems for which we have non-zero lower limits, and those values are at a few, maybe 50 or 70 at most kilometers per second. This is both from my group, but a couple of other groups. But the one that has a very high, low, minimum velocity is up in the halo, and you cannot exclude that it was ejected from a cluster. So you find a high non-zero minimum velocity, but you're assuming it came from the disk. If it came from a cluster, then it's not a high kick velocity. 1118, yeah.
We have abundances for that, and they're not low.
You have what?
There's abundances for that from the donor side.
And they're not low. So there is the issue of contamination, maybe they're not primordial, so it's a bit of a messy story. But The other comment I want to make is that it's important to not just look at the center of mass velocities of binaries and immediately connect them to kick velocities. Because the center of mass velocities post-kick are actually telling you more about the mass loss and the orbital velocity before the explosion, and much less about the magnitude of the kick. I'll point this out. The mathematics are in the literature, how this works. But please don't always connect center of mass velocities that we measure to the magnitude of the kick.
Thanks. I have a question to Thibault. You showed the results for the stable mass transfer and the highly conservative mass transfer. So I was mentioning this system yesterday as well, HR6819. There was this work by Picot et al. Who showed that it's virtually, they found impossible to reproduce with MESA. So how do your results, are they consistent, or what are the differences between your methods?
Out of the 16 systems that we considered, that is one of the systems that we looked at. But that's when we try to infer the initial periods of that systems, we run into trouble. So that's one of the systems we actually excluded from our mass transfer efficiency constraints. We also have very strong difficulties modeling that system. Yes.
There's a question about the winds and the stripped stars. So I guess we have some constraint on winds for more massive Wolf-Rayet stars at those metallicities, which is, I assume, those were considered in coming up with the relations that these sit below. So do we understand physically why, what's different at lower masses? Or maybe I don't even know if there was a physical model, if it was just a polynomial. But yeah, I don't know. Why might the winds be lower than those models predict?
So the physics of wind driving in general should be different, because the Wolf-Rayet stars have optically thick winds. These are not. And so this is would be very interesting to see actually what drives the wind, and this is something that I'm interested to do again. but we don't know now exactly yet what is actually driving the wind. But of course, these are like different from the Wolf-Rayet stars.
Thanks.
Thanks. I have a question to Cheyenne. Whether based on the presence of the tertiary in V404, you can exclude the fact that there was a common envelope under the assumption that in common envelope you would eject half the mass of the system in a short time scale? And if the answer is yes, then how much do we know about the presence of tertiaries around all the other black hole lambda 6 binaries? And can we know this?
Yeah, so one, that's a really great question. So the mass loss that you're probing, so what you're saying is that if you lose mass on a timescale shorter than the tertiary's orbital period, it effectively feels a Blau kick that I think Vicky was alluding to earlier. And so we include Blau kicks in our simulations, like you have mass loss on a rapid timescale. And in some cases, the tertiary still survives. So it just depends on like its initial configuration. To the second part of your question, there has been look on constraining the timescale of common envelope using post-common envelope binaries inside triples today. It's Ego, Shevin, Peretz, 2019 to 2021, something like that. And while I think you can do it, it just relies on a couple key assumptions. One, those post-common envelope binaries are post-common envelope, which might be a little bit problematic. And the second thing is some assumption on the initial distribution of the tertiary separations. And so while it can be done, it relies on those assumptions, so we have to be careful.
Thanks.
Good question.
Just a comment to what Karim was asking about. So yesterday I showed there's this transition from O stars to Wolf-Rayet stars in the hydrogen-rich universe. You would expect something similar in the strip star universe, so the classical Wolf-Rayet stars and these low mass strip stars. So the critical physics will do with how it depends on L and M, separate from each other. So any reliable relation should contain both an L dependence and an M dependence, I think. So if there's a helium dependence, I think that's an indirect effect. There's some evolutionary reason why it happens to be a Y dependence, but there's no physical reason. But it can be an accurate relation. So if you're in that regime, your relationship might be accurate. But if you extrapolate, you'll be wrong.
Okay, there was first a question by Adam.
Adam Burrows, this is for Cheyenne. You mentioned for cataclysmic variables that you think that the triples are very important. You implied that they were most important. However, it's not clear to me that a lot of the CVs don't come from lower mass binaries. And the triple fraction is fairly low for the lower mass. So maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, wait, did I imply that they're the most important? I said in a population, they contribute to 40% of the CVs that we see today formed in triples. And so I wouldn't actually call them low mass. So if we look at the white dwarf mass distribution of CVs, it peaks at 0.8 solar mass, assuming some white dwarf initial final mass relation. Let's say that came from a 3 solar mass star. Not the typical 1 solar mass star that gives you a 0.5 solar mass white dwarf. If we look at a triple fraction at 3 solar masses, I would first like to ask the audience to give a guess, but it doesn't really matter. But it turns out that that is of order 30 to 40%.
It didn't look like it was that large on your plot, but I probably just misread it.
At the plot, at 2 solar masses, it's 35% plus or minus 5%.
Really? Okay, I just misread it. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Mathieu Ranzo. I wanted to return on the wind dependency. So I understand the physics of the different dependence of L and M in the winds, but for stellar modelers, unless you have dynamical masses for all your sample, it's really bad to put M in there because it's model dependent and you create like a logical loop. That's a problem that we have on the red supergiant mass loss rates that are empirical. Some are empirically determined using masses from cluster fits. So for the Bashish, I guess I would try to not put that in your empirical fits and put instead like something like a log G that you can measure from your spectrum instead of a mass dependence or gamma Eddington, something like that. Okay, I have a question. Oh, is there a question?
No, you go for it. I was just thinking about the time.
Oh, actually, okay. You talked, so it's for Cheyenne. You talked about using triples to solve the formation of systems that are like hard to form using common envelope, or maybe. What about Gaia BH1?
Well. The first day we learned about forming Gaia BH1 through some triple channel, but those were very different triples than the triples I talked about. So I spent many months of my life thinking about whether this channel that forms LMXBs can form your Gaia BHs too. And while I will say that it's probably possible in some fine-tuned region of the parameter space, considering, a resonance between the GR precession and cosi and the right orbital configurations. Just because you have a theoretical channel, the rest of the sentence, right? So that was never published, and I think this specific channel mentioned is probably not the way to do it, especially given the high rates of Gaia black holes.
Okay, so I guess it's good time to break for lunch.